Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Sunny in Colorado, and today I want to talk about the pros and cons of living in northern Colorado, specifically Fort Collins, Colorado. Living in northern Colorado, there's a lot of small towns to pick from, and there's also some larger towns. And nowadays, they're growing so much that they're almost starting to connect together. So you can live in northern Colorado and be about 30 to 45 minutes away from every single town in northern Colorado, depending on where you live. Fort Collins is one of the largest and robust towns up in northern Colorado and is one of the farthest northern cities to live in northern Colorado. First, I want to start with the pros of living in Colorado. Now, some of these may be pros to you, they may be cons to you, depending on how you feel about things like snow, etc., etc. But I'm going to save the cons till the end. There are a lot more pros than cons, but it just depends, and it will vary from person to person on how you feel about these. So let's get started. If you know anything about Fort Collins or ever lived in Fort Collins, tell me some of the things you disliked or loved about Fort Collins. So the population in Fort Collins in 2020, the last census, was about 170,000, and now it's above 330,000. So they have grown a lot in the last 20 years. And to be truthful, all the cities in northern Colorado has grown a lot since 2020. But let's get back to Fort Collins. One of the biggest things you'll find when you first come to Fort Collins is just the natural beauty of everything up here. The hustle bustle of the town. It's nothing like a really dense city where there's just people all over the place pushing and crowding and cars honking. There's not a whole lot of that. Northern Colorado, it has a really laid back nature to it, so you don't get a lot of just honking at you for no reason or someone saying something out in the middle of the streets or anything like that. Most people here are very helpful, very grateful, and are willing to assist somebody in need at most times. Fort Collins is based right at the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, so no matter where you live in Fort Collins, you always get the beautiful Rocky Mountains as your western view. There are tons of activities, so if you're into any kind of outdoor activities, Fort Collins is a place for you. Whether it's hiking, biking, water skiing, skiing in the winter, boating, kayaking, all these great things are within 30 minutes of no matter where you are in Fort Collins. The best part about that is you could do a lot of day trip staycations, whether it's going down to Denver or just going up into the mountains to hang out for the day and have a barbecue and then returning home. The location of Fort Collins makes it great just for staying in the area, having to leave to another state in order to get your groove on in things that you love to do, such as skiing, biking, any of those outdoor sports. Fort Collins has a strong economy. It's a very diverse economy. It has a mix of high-tech, manufacturing, and industrial services, and also supports the service industry. Having the mix of these professions all together helps to support a very strong job economy in Fort Collins. Fort Collins has great education from 5-star high schools, private schools, public schools, charter schools, which are also considered public schools, but there are charter schools as well. You also have CSU, Colorado State University, which has a very strong engineering, business, and science courses. And because there's numerous public schools and private schools, it makes it a great place to raise a family. If you have a very active lifestyle, maybe you don't like being out in the cold, there's plenty of recreational facilities as well to participate in winter activities, but inside, or I should say summer activities, but inside. One thing they definitely aren't scarce on is parks. There are many different parks, whether you love biking, BMX biking, playing with RCs, just hiking, walking, small trails, dog parks, all of them. They have everything, and they're great places for kids to play. They have great different facilities at each different park everywhere. So it's always good to get a list of these parks and just go from park to park to park to park. And you'll find it is an adventure in itself, especially if you have children. Fort Collins also supports a vast culture in different activities, whether it's dining, coffee. If you like to go coffee, there's plenty of coffee shops, plenty of different type of foods, vegan, meat eaters, pizza, tacos, whatever you're into. It's not just a bunch of fast food. There's mom and pops all over the place. You could be going down an alley and find your favorite coffee shop. That's what's great about Fort Collins as well, is there's just something everywhere, and it makes the city feel just a little whimsical sometimes, especially when the lights are right or the weather is right. It is such a good feeling downtown Fort Collins as well. There's definitely a thriving arts and cultural scene. There's galleries to go to if you're into art. There's plenty of music venues, festivals that go on throughout the year, and there definitely is no shortage of the different type of beers. Fort Collins is well known for having tons of microbreweries. If you go into a restaurant, usually they have their own folder for just the beers that are in the area. There's a lot of micro beers, so if you're into all the different type of flavored beers, I don't think you can run out in Fort Collins if you will go and taste test beers every single day. And that brings me, there's also the Busch Budweiser area with the Clydesdale horses that pull as well, and you can go and visit them. If they have babies, you can go visit those babies and visit the facility and test beers as well. So there's a lot of that size, wine tasting, beer tasting, those type of things. They all exist within Fort Collins. So wrapping up Fort Collins on the pros, there's plenty to do physically, plenty to do mentally, and plenty of people to do that with. The one thing I do enjoy about Fort Collins, I've lived up in this area for over 20 years, that when you even have bad traffic in Fort Collins, it's not that bad. It moves along, but you don't have the stress of people cutting you off, not letting you in, flipping you off as they're going by, honking their horns. It doesn't happen as much as it would in the inner city where people are just, they get angry, and you know how it goes. It's a stressful environment. Usually in Fort Collins, for example, if there was a whole bunch of cars leaving the area and there's one way out, this just happens automatically, but you'll notice the car in front of you will go, then you'll go, then the next car, and they go backwards the same way a four-way intersection would be. They just repeat back and forth and the traffic moves. And maybe that's why, just because the culture created that, or somehow it just makes traveling, even in the worst traveling situation in northern Colorado, just a little better than most places I've ever been in traffic. All right, with all that said, let's get to the meat and the gritty, the stuff we don't want, the cons. Now, once again, these cons may not be cons for you, but in general, these would be considered cons overall for most cities. One of the biggest cons, I guess, would be like the tolerating of winter. When winter comes, winter could be harsh, okay? So it can come and make a lot of snow that you're going to have to be cleaning up from the front of your driveway, or maybe from the front of your business location, depending on what you do up here in Fort Collins. So the biggest thing I always had a problem with coming from California in my youth, visiting Colorado all the time, snow wasn't a normal thing for me. And then moving here back in the 90s, it was something you had to get used to, cleaning up snow, dealing with snow on a winter basis. Then it becomes a natural part of life, and it's not a big deal. It's just snow. It's just a small inconvenience, but life goes on. Public transportation. They don't have an in-depth public transportation system in Fort Collins. There is a bus system that you can get from going from point A to point B. It'll get you close, but it's not going to take you everywhere you want to go. It's basically will run north to south type of public transportation, but there's plenty of Ubers, taxis, and all those great things that you can use as well. There's also bicycles, scooters, those type of things. The median income in Fort Collins is about $65,000 a year. Right now, at the making of this video being January of 2023, the median household price is about $585,000. It doesn't mean you can't find something for $250,000, but it's going to be pretty hard to find something for $250,000. Going back to the limited transportation, it's definitely better to own a car than not to own a car when living in Fort Collins. This way you can get around at your own time, and especially when public systems turn off or shut down, you can still get around. My biggest recommendation of the type of car you want in Fort Collins is to have an all-wheel drive. I would choose all-wheel drive even over four-wheel drive. During the wintertime, I see plenty of four-wheel drive trucks on the side of the road, but what I don't see is Subarus. Not on the side of the road. Subaru is a very common car up here because it gets the job done in the snow and keeps you on the road and safe. But however, at least four-wheel drive, front-wheel drive, or all-wheel drive is definitely my recommended car to have up here in Fort Collins. That being said, there are laws when it comes to when there's a lot of snow on the ground. You will be required to either have a four-wheel drive or a all-wheel drive or chains. You can't just drive a front-wheel drive car in a snow area that has chain requirements. You will have to have four-wheel drive, all-wheel drive, or chains, or a combination of both. Like I said, there's not a lot of cons. Some of these may be bigger for you. Maybe none of these mean anything. But overall, Fort Collins is a great place to live. It's always in the top 10 of some of the best cities in America to live. So that's always a plus. So if you have any more questions about Fort Collins, or if you've lived here, like I said, and you have some of your own pros and cons, I would love to hear about them. Maybe they may not exist anymore because things have changed a lot in the last 5 years, especially since the oil boom that occurred a little while back. That's all I have for you today. If you enjoyed this piece, don't forget to like and subscribe. But the one thing I love to hear about is comments. Just tell me where you're from, maybe some of the things you deal with, and how they compare to living in northern Colorado. Till next time, you have a great time, a great life, and remember, always move forward.